And we are live. Ren, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing, all fine and dandy. For those of you who just joined us, this is the Best Girls Podcast, hosted by JadeNovanis, myself, and a
Ren,
Ren.
girl.
And it's a pleasure to have you all in tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about what was on the docket today, Ren. I seem to have misplaced my notes.
Today, the best girls are going to be talking about why they hate the modern gaming industry.
Ooh, fun. I could go about this for hours. So, where would you like to begin?
I think the only place to begin is the beginning, or at least our beginning with video games as a whole.
All right. So, I think, at least to set the stage, I think the best idea would probably be to paint a picture of how the games industry and how we got started with games specifically. So like what we got started on, our first systems, our first games, and then kind of, go out from there. So, what did you get started on? What was your first video game system or handheld, or what got you in to video games?
My first experience with video games,
Uh-huh.
was on the Nintendo 64. The earliest memories I have are it was either that or the Super Nintendo. Either way, my earliest memories of video games are Mario Kart 64 and
Oh,
Star Fox 64.
really?
Yeah.
All right. So that those are like the earliest games you can recall that you played like growing up.
I mean, I think that those two are like the earliest, but there were some others as well. Other Nintendo games that everyone played.
See, that I think that's kind of interesting because my dad is the person who got me into video games. Um my dad was, surprisingly enough, a pretty big gamer. He was pretty big on a lot of kind of media at the time. I know, for those of you who watch my streams, I have talked about how, like, my dad is the one who got me into Yu-Gi-Oh to begin with. But when it came to games, my dad was a huge gamer, like primarily PC games, but he had a bunch of different video game consoles. And I just find it funny, given that you grew up with all Nintendo stuff, because for the most part, I grew up with all Sega stuff. My first video game systems that I remember playing was a Sega Genesis and a Game Gear.
Woof, I'm on the opposite side of that console war. I was Nintendo 64 and the Game Boy.
Sega does what Nintendo don't. Um I mean, I eventually ended up, Sega stopped making consoles and shit, but so I obviously eventually moved over to Nintendo sooner rather than later. But like I'm talking like I remember being like 4 or 5 and my dad would be playing the Genesis in the living room and I would just go up to him and be like, "I want to play." And then he had for some of my siblings, he had a Power Rangers game. And it was like a Power Rangers fighting game on the Genesis. I don't know what game this is. I might just be I I don't remember this game. But I would play that so much I would kick his fucking ass. I was like 4 or 5 at the time and I would kick his ass at that fighting game. Um, that's probably my earliest memory of video games as a whole is playing that Power Rangers fighting game specifically. Um, and then of course my dad also had a Game Gear, so when he was playing the Genesis, I would be on the Game Gear. And I remember he had, because my dad was also like big into Power Rangers and stuff at the time too. He had like a Power Rangers like side scrolling beat 'em up, and then like a couple of racing games, and then obviously whichever Sonic was on the Game Gear. And I would play all of those a ton at the time. But then, of course, Sega did what Sega did, and I was, kind of just happened that way. Um, so after that, it's kind of a weird blank spot because I don't remember having many video game consoles after that. Because I remember we moved shortly after, and then we just kind of didn't have very many video gaming consoles. My dad would play on the gaming, at the time, a gaming PC. This is like a 2005 gaming PC. Um, and he would play like old RPGs like Subterra Core. And I remember vividly playing that game on that PC. Amongst, obviously, he would buy games from me and my siblings. So, like, I had, like, Lego Rock Raiders and Lego Island and Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius, all PC games. And they were all pretty all right. Probably dog shit if I ever went back to actually replay them. Except Rock Raiders. That game is excellent. And they just did a remake recently, a fan remake, and it's fucking amazing. But yeah, that's kind of the early years, at least for me, was just I kind of just had hand-me-downs or played what my dad had in terms of Genesis Game Gear, and then later PC stuff.
That's kind of funny. You bringing up all that.
Mm-hmm.
That's, to some degree, there's a little bit of overlap.
Oh.
So, my dad, he was super into gaming when it was still in its infancy, specifically computer gaming.
I feel like that was a trend amongst people of that age bracket.
Yeah, but he was to like whatever whatever he could get on floppy disks and whatever he could just, yeah, basically get his hands on.
Yeah.
Ski Free, Chips Challenge, Commander Keen.
Oh my god, that actually reminds I had all of those on PC also. I could only ever play them on my grandma's PC when we would go over to her house for the summer. But she had like Lionel Train Simulator, Chips Challenge, like Ski Free, all of those as well.
But yeah, my dad was super huge into that, and he he tried to get he knew the value in games at the time. He couldn't quite like what am I trying to say? He was super into it, and he really enjoyed them at the time. And then when he had his first kid, he he imparted a lot of that onto them, and then eventually, by the time I was born and all that and was old enough to appreciate it, eventually he kind of reclaimed a lot of those PC games and then started letting me play them on his computer. Sure, I started with like Nintendo and the Game Boy, but there definitely was a distinct period where I was just playing whatever dumb shit was on PC that my dad had. Like, and this was like some of it good, some of it bad, some of it very bad. Like bottom of the barrel Timon and Pumbaa.
my God.
But I was a dumb kid. Entertainment was put in front of my eyes. Stimulation was put in front of my eyes. I enjoyed it. But yeah, that's my my initial interest in video games was inspired by my father as well as my older siblings.
Very cute. That actually brought something up. So you were also like a big PC gamer, I guess, back like growing up more than anything, right?
Uh, fuck. What's that one company? The one company that did Putt Putt. I played a lot of those games.
Oh fuck yeah, like those like visual novel basically point and click adventure
Visual
games.
novel.
That's basically what they were. They were just visual novel point and click adventure games.
they were they were baby's first point and click adventure. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a bunch of those too. Fuck, you're bringing back so many memories, girly. Like I had a bunch of those putt putt games, and then the Ghost Kid one, and the fish one. I don't remember what the fish one was called.
I specifically remember playing mostly the fish ones and Putt Putt Goes to the Zoo.
Sure, but like I also had like obviously various other ones on PC. I already mentioned like Septerra Core was one that I played a whole lot. That's like aside from like that Power Rangers fighting game, Septerra Core was like the first game I can remember that I genuinely got super super into. Like I played that entire game front to back. I got super into the lore and reading about it and doing all the side quests. Like I went in depth with that game. And for those of you who don't know what Septerra Core is, it was like I believe a 1999 PC RPG that was very much so inspired by Final Fantasy VI, I believe at the time, and 7. And they were kind of trying to push the envelope in the genre. Like it was a Western made video game, but they were very much it was a JRPG. Like it had an active time battle from fucking Final Fantasy 7 and everything. But instead of it being, limited by the PS2 or PS1, that game specifically was kind of an achievement at the time because it was fully 3D. Well, as 3D as games could be. Like the full 3D models of the characters, that was just the 3D model. So it wasn't like, oh, the chibi, models in Final Fantasy 7 for the overworld and then the nice models in battle. It was just you always had the nice models. The battle system, there wasn't a loading screen in between battle and the overworld, so it was one of the first games that kind of like you got into an encounter, your characters just kind of jumped into battle and you were good to go, at least for the 3D games. Kind of like Chrono Trigger, kind of like how Chrono Trigger does it, where like you don't really get a transition scene or anything like that. And it was fully voiced. And notably, it was actually one of the voice actor for Master Chief, Halo, John Halo. It was one of his first ever video game roles, and it's what helped get him kind of on the map. And that's how a lot of the people at Microsoft and Bungie found him, actually, for Halo. Aside from that, that's about the most famous thing Septerra Core ever did was finding John Halo. But yeah, like I remember playing that, Rock Raiders and all the Lego games, Lego Racers. Holy fuck, how did I forget about that one? Amongst just a lot of other just like, of course, Cartoon Network games online and all that shit. Whatever I could get my hands on, realistically on PC, like I would play like crazy. I feel like I'm forgetting one. Septerra Core was like the big one, but I feel Ashrins. I'm gonna bring this up later in the podcast specifically because I want to bring up I want to see how our earliest games, like the games we were brought up on, how that influenced what our taste is in video games nowadays. Because I can definitely see the correlation with myself. But I'll bring up more on that later. So keep that in mind, Ren. But yeah, one of the other big games besides Subterra Core was Asheron's Call. My dad was a huge paying subscriber to that game for years. Again, for those of you who don't know, this was effectively a WoW clone produced by Microsoft for PC to compete against World of Warcraft at the time. And I played a lot of that, just like my dad. And, again, that's that era where, like, the only time you would ever really pay for not even microtransactions, because it wasn't quite microtransactions. It was a subscription service. That was basically only MMOs at the time. But yeah, so that was my early experiences. Anything else you can think of, Ren?
In what regard?
Like anything else early that you can think that was like a notable shout out, like a game that really signified that time period for you?
Now, this is going to sound like an easy answer, but 3D platformers in general. Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie, Rayman 2.
Yep. I haven't gotten to like my PlayStation era gaming because that didn't happen. I didn't end up getting a PlayStation until I got a PlayStation 2 in, I think, 2003. But that comes later.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
Of course.
That was just one of those games that I latched onto. I played a lot.
It's crazy that a lot of people say that. I hear that all the time. I could never get into them.
Understandable.
But that brings us to kind of so that was kind of the era of us kind of just, I guess, leeching off of our parents, right? Very, very much so. We just kind of played what our parents had, and they didn't really think to get us our own video games, anything. What was like the first video game console or anything that you got that was uniquely your own? If you need time to think, I already have mine. But so mine, after the PC and everything, specifically, I recall, I might be getting my time mixed up a little bit, but if I remember correctly, I was basically just playing PC games that my dad had. By the time I was playing these PC games, my dad had basically thrown all of the old consoles in storage. The only thing I really had access to was a Game Gear, and my dad had purchased a Game Boy Color for himself with a copy of Pokemon Crystal. That's all he played. He never let me touch the Game Boy Advance or the Game Boy Color, ever. But then I want to say around 2003 or so, it was Easter 2003, I believe. We're coming downstairs. Let me double check the timing on that. Yeah. Yeah, it was about Easter 2003. Um so I'm me and my siblings are coming out of our room for Easter. You know, we were still relatively young. I think in 2003, how old were we? I think I was I think I was like 6 or 7 or 8, something like that. Um I can't do math on the fly right now. Um and sitting on the coffee table from the Easter bunny, as it would say, were a few brand new packaged bundles with a Game Boy Advanced SP in each of them. That was the first video game console that me and my siblings ever had that was each our own. Um I had gotten a red one. I still have that Game Boy Advance SP to this day, actually. I was gifted a red one. My sibling was gifted a blue one. And then for Easter, our parents took us out for that same day. They took us out for seafood, and immediately my sibling loses their Game Boy Advance SP at the restaurant, and we can't find it. So they're just immediately out. So I had a Game Boy Advance SP to myself for all of 6 hours. I then had to share my SP for like 2 weeks until my parents could afford a replacement. Um, but yeah, that SP was mine. I loved that SP. Um, I got, believe it or not, Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship 2003. Who would have guessed? For the Game Boy Advanced. And I played the shit out of that. I played it in German for a little bit too because I couldn't figure out how to change the language setting. But that's fine. But that was my first system. And then shortly thereafter, like I want to say probably less than a year later, we ended up getting a PS2 as well because one of my mom's best friends, they had gotten a PS2 for their kids, and I was addicted to it. I would go over to their house and just sit on their PS2 playing Jack 2 endlessly. Mind you, I was like 8 at this point, 8 or 9, I think. And I'm sitting there playing Jack 2 for the PS2, shooting people and all sorts of stuff. And then they eventually just bought me and my siblings a PS2. We got a PS2, and basically by that point, by the time we had gotten one, I think almost all of the main Sony platformers had come out. So the games I got with my PS2 were Ratchet and Clank 2, Jak and Daxter, Jak 2. And I don't think we had Jak 3 yet. I think that was coming out. But yeah, that's about where we started. I can go a little bit more in depth with it, but we haven't heard Ren talk for a hot minute.
You see, the problem is that's a very technically, I had my very first console, my very own gaming system for myself with a Game Boy Color, but I didn't have games for it. All of my games were borrowed from my siblings. And that basically paints the picture for most of my early childhood, most of my childhood up until like maybe 4th or 5th grade,
Mm-hmm.
because my parents learned something fast. My older siblings, they were the ones that were very vocal about what they wanted in terms of games. they knew what they wanted. They played a lot. They rented games a lot. They got to develop their tastes. I was just happy to have a controller in my hands. I was happy to just see polygons or pixels moving across the screen. I was kind of an afterthought. And as a result, whatever games that I did get for like my Game Boy or my GBA or even on the N64 or GameCube, they were really more for my siblings. So I want to say the first console that actually felt like my own, like I wasn't an afterthought, was probably the DS.
All right. All right. And did you get like any particular games for it or anything?
Um, Nintendogs, Labrador and Friends, and Mario Kart DS
Ah, I see. I
because because we couldn't we couldn't fuck we couldn't take care of a dog at the time. We just our property wouldn't allow for a dog at the time. So, you know, that's like the next best thing, right? Nintendogs.
mm-hmm. See, when I got my DS, I started with Chihuahua and Friends. I got when me and my siblings, because me and my siblings also got DSs. We got them for Christmas the year the DS Lite came out. And with that, we got 3 games, one for each of us and one for us to share. And at that point, when I got my DS for Christmas, I got a copy of Pokemon Ranger. My sibling got Aragon. And then we got to share Nintendogs, Chihuahua and Friends. And those were like my only DS games for a really long time. At least until like Diamond and Pearl came out, basically. I just did not get DS games very often. I got GBA games all the time. I still have most of those. I've shown Ren quite a few times, but I just have dozens of copies of various Mega Man Battle Network games. And that actually kind of brings me back. What was the first game that you ever got that was yours? Specifically, not maybe one that was gifted to you, but one that you actually picked out and chose yourself. Because I know what mine is, and mine's not going to come to any surprise. And that was Mega Man Battle Network 4 Red Sun for the Game Boy Advanced. About a week after I had gotten my Game Boy Advanced from Easter, my parents took us all down to Toys R Us. Rest in peace. And they let us all each pick out a game, and I picked out Mega Man Battle Network 4 Red Sun. I still have that copy to this day. But yeah, Ren, what was your first video game that you actively picked out for yourself? Because like you said, you usually got a lot of hand-me-downs and stuff.
If I'm being completely honest,
You don't remember?
I want to say maybe Rayman 2, but that's after like renting it a dozen times and seeing my siblings play it over and over and just kind of linking my memory to that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, fair.
Aside from that, hmm, I was a dumb kid and didn't know what I wanted.
Oh no. So you just didn't have an idea of what you wanted. You just kind of went with the flow, more or less.
If I saw a commercial for Nintendo game, I recognize Link, I recognize Mario, I recognize Kirby. Yeah, I want those. Those are colorful characters. I like them. They're Nintendo. I like Nintendo.
Fair enough. Very, very fair.
I think, hmm, the very first game that I personally, me personally, the very first game that I received that was mine, it wasn't just communally, oh, this is my brother's, this is whatever. No, the first game I received that was this is very clearly for Ren, for the best girl.
Yes.
Wario Land 4.
Really? All right. So this is starting to paint a clearer picture, so to speak.
And that game was I played it. I played it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've never played it, I'm sure you haven't, Jade.
WarioWare? I've never played a
Wario
WarioWare.
Lands.
Wait, was that the one that was actually a 2D side scroller?
Yes,
For
Wario Land 4 is the one that's on GBA.
Okay, I haven't played the GBA one. I played the Game Boy Color one.
Okay. And the one that you played, was it the one where like things would happen to Wario and those sort of acted as like his power-ups?
Yes. So like he'd eat something and then he'd get like fart superpowers or something, right?
No, but yeah, you got the idea.
Okay, yeah. I think I'm fairly certain it was 3. Whichever one 3 was.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. It's basically that game again, but Wario Land is kind of a weird fucking series, and Wario Land 4 kind of takes the cake. Everything about that game feels frantic and anxiety inducing. And
Mhm.
as a child, I didn't know how to process that. I enjoyed it, but
But
there were weird elements that my dumb, tiny, however many year old brain, I just didn't understand. It's like, oh, there's a ghost pirate in the background of this level. Like, that's scary, I think. Oh, there's this lava level that this level fucking sucks. Oh,
yeah.
there's an Arabian Nights level. It's kind of cool, I guess. But it's such a weird game, and I played it a bunch, and I didn't really have a tr- I didn't really have a trail of thought.
I mean, very fair. But all right. So that kind of again paints that little picture a little bit more. Um, so then I guess we'll get to the long short of it. How do you feel that your early video game preferences, or what was given to you by your parents, what you played as a child, how do you think that's influenced how you perceive games now? Like, what games you gravitate towards, what games you like more than others. Um, you know, you know what I'm trying to say.
I think the early stuff definitely painted a strong picture as to what my comfort is
Yeah,
as we as we get older, as we become elderly. I just find it harder to get into games as much anymore. I don't have the time to spend on games. I don't have time to dump 300 hours into a game. And I've found that the easiest way for myself to get into a game is if it's a genre I really, really like, or if it's something that has a very sort of short gameplay loop that I can come back to over and over.
yeah,
And
like
one of the big comfort genres for me are 3D platformers.
yeah. I mean, I definitely see it with myself. I definitely, like I mentioned, I grew up playing our Septerra Core, which is effectively a JRPG or an open, kind of open-ish world RPG. Asheron's Call being effectively a World of Warcraft clone. And, like, guess what I play most of the time nowadays? I love open world RPGs. I love JRPGs. I love just RPGs in general. I love MMOs. And that it's just kind of funny that like that small of a thing of my dad just letting me play on his computer like molded my taste. Like sure, sample size, whatever you want to call it, like it is possible that I'm just, it is possible that it's just a coincidence that I grew up to like JRPGs and open world RPGs and stuff. But like, I just find it kind of neat. I kind of find it funny that that is even a correlation to be found, you know? But yeah. Um, but, but yeah. That is kind of the general thought out of the way of like where we started, how things were. But the real subject of tonight's little podcast here, after 40 minutes, we're getting to the actual plot of this podcast. Why the best girls hate the modern gaming industry and the many issues that have come up around it. Take it away, best girl.
Uh huh.
Uh huh.
So, how do I put this? For as long as video games have existed, hell, as long as marketable things have existed, the industry always gravitates towards whatever is successful at the time. And whatever is successful is what sort of dictates and what um, direction everyone else follows suit. You know, while perhaps myself and Jade may have not seen it in the Super Nintendo era or the NES era or the arcade or Commodore 64 and Atari eras. You can see it in the 3D era at the very least, where the transition from 2D to 3D was very hard and rough for a lot of developers until a couple of developers really hit that stride. They really hit those big successes. Those Mario 64s, those Crash Bandicoots, those games that just really took off. And for a while, those kind of games became the trend. They set the example as to what a game should be in the third dimension era, the 64-bit era. Obviously, not everything followed that, but for as many games that didn't follow it, there were any number of who cares mascot platformer games by no name companies that didn't exist beyond, the first year of that game they made. And you can also see it a bit you can see it in every console generation.
You
Every
you
Go ahead.
even saw it like one of the biggest one, the most like the one that a lot of people know about is PC gaming. PC gaming erupted when WoW popped off. Like that's the obvious one. When World of Warcraft popped off and was making gangbusters, the amount of World of Warcraft clones that popped up around that time period is astronomical. The amount of developers, the amount of publishers trying to churn out quick money with a, MMORPG as quickly as they can during that era was insane.
You can even look at it even before then, like the early FPSs with the
Doom, yeah.
Doom, Wolfenstein, hell, Quake.
Rest in peace.
Even before then, you had, those point and click adventures. Those were really popular. And then, what is it? LucasArts Games made one of the most famous point and click adventure games ever
No,
that nobody was willing to ever let go of.
They did Monkey Island, right, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's like it was like I literally just mentioned that I started gaming with or one of the earliest games that I got really into was Asheron's Call, which was an effect of World of Warcraft. Without World of Warcraft happening, Asheron's Call definitely wouldn't have happened. And it's the industry's always kind of been like that. Is they always liked to ride the wave. They liked to jump onto the bandwagon, ride that wave, and try to make as much money as they could in as short a time as possible by hitting those, that's always been the case. Like that, we're not saying that's something new. It's just the problem with that mindset of always trying to homogenize causes similar to what's happening in the movie industry that we will get around to talking about. But it begins to homogenize things to the point where you kind of can't, at least when it comes to like big budget games, you can't just make what you want anymore. Like ever since like I'd probably say like PS3 era, you can't just make what you want anymore because developers won't or publishers won't give you the money to make it unless it fits into whatever that fad of the moment is. Back in the PS3 era, it was choice-based, third-person kind of shooter action games like Uncharted and The Last of Us and Infamous and stuff like that. In the PS4 era, it was shooters. Who can make or the early PS4 era, shooters. Who can make the next Call of Duty? Who can do that? That was also PS3 era as well. And then it became the live service. Who can be the Destiny killer? How many times have you heard that fucking slung around where the Division's coming out, it's the big Destiny killer. Anthem, it's the big Destiny killer. Warframe, the Destiny killer. Like, and that's kind of pervaded all the way to now. I feel like out of all of those booms, all of those bubbles that hit, I feel like the live service bubble has been the most damning. It's been the most toxic. It's been the most vile and awful for the, industry as a whole. Live service, and for those who don't know what a live service game is, basically, live service games are defined by the fact that they are games created to be updated in perpetuity. Typically with the added bonus of them also getting money continually, either through like expansions, microtransactions, etc. Think World of Warcraft, but with even more DLCs, microtransactions, and in-app purchases. That's effectively what a live service game is at its core. They basically took the idea of your World of Warcrafts, of your MMOs, and tried to apply that mentality to non-RPG, non-open RPG formulas. And that's when you got Destiny. That was like the first big live service game. And then everything and their mother tried copying them. Another thing that kind of played into this, and I know Ren mentioned it, or not, mentioned it to me off podcast, but the mobile industry also had a big hand in the advent of this kind of the live service. Let me kind of reword it. The live service is a symptom of the overall problem, not the cause. It's the culmination of several other problems within the industry, one of which was started with our good pal Todd Howard and his horse armor, and the mobile industry, and that is the microtransaction. Ren.
Yes. Oh, did you wish me to take it away?
Yes, I did.
Whisk us into a world of beautiful word paintings.
Indeed, please do.
Well, shit, girl, I ain't got no word paintings. Microtransactions, if you've lived under a rock, is the act of selling goods or services, digital goods or services, for a game through in-app, in-game purchases using real-world currency. And this was something that was
It was kind of started pretty far back. Like I mentioned, like I mentioned it with Todd Howard, like him trying to sell small additional DLC that didn't really contain much. That's kind of where a lot of the ideas stem from, at least in the modern consciousness. I'm sure other developers have done it in the past as well.
I'd argue even stems back further from that through just the mobile industry, the amount of people, who try to, sell you custom ringtones, when you're dialing your friends. Oh, they get to listen to this favorite song of theirs. Oh, but you have to pay a toll fee for to download that. The idea of these little extra commodities, I feel that started even outside of the games industry, but
no,
the two homogenizing through like the mobile industry is what brought it into the gaming industry.
Yeah, I actually never thought of it that way, but you're actually right. The fact that microtransactions became as prevalent as they were, and still are to this day, is kind of, again, another symptom of the way mobile purchases were during the inception of it all. Back in that time, you would buy a mobile game, off of on your shitty flip phone. You'd buy Lost, the video game, on your shitty Verizon flip phone for like 99 cents, right? Or you'd buy, some Alicia Keys song for 99 cents to be as your ringtone. Or you'd buy, all sorts of things. Effectively, the idea of a microtransaction almost stemmed from phones themselves in a lot of ways. And just that nickel and diming you of basically being allowed to do anything with the device that you have. And by virtue of games kind of getting introduced to that all just kind of started to layer itself on. I never thought of it that way, but you're right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's certainly something with that. But yeah, like, that has been a significant problem within the industry for a while. And it's just the idea of the microtransaction at its core, even at its core, there's no consumer-based point for it. If you're like, in the context of specifically the mobile market, it made, I guess, some sense in the case that, okay, if by doing this, we can then give you the game for free. It's the inception of the free-to-play model, right? That kind of made sense on paper. But in reality, it's just like, just let me buy the game. Like everything else. Why can't I just buy the game like I was on my shitty fucking Nokia flip phone on Verizon? Why can't I just buy the game like I do on Nintendo and on PlayStation and on Xbox? But that way of thinking, that way of nickel and diming you for all of this little stuff, the microtransaction mindset ended up pervading everything. Not just video games. It even began to spread elsewhere to all facets of tech, and even outside of that, the amount of fucking subscription services that you have to buy just to shop at stores now. You walk into a fucking GameStop and they literally berate you trying to sell you like 16 different subscription services. You walk into any place and they're like, download our app, buy your memberships. You get 5.5% off on everything. Oh, you bought a Tesla? It'll be an extra subscription fee if you want to enable the air conditioner. And it's like that whole mentality has just spun into fucking everything nowadays. It's not even just the games industry. And I fucking hate it. I hate so much of what this has done to not just the games industry, but kind of society as a whole, to where like everything just has like a little bit of, 99 cents there, $3 there. And don't even get me started on macro transactions, as I've dubbed them. The idea of, because yeah, you had your microtransactions and like Angry Birds and stuff early on, right? 99 cents here for like an extra life, or $2 for a bird skin or something, right? Or maybe in the rare case, like $5 for like a new set of levels or something. Sure. But then gacha games happened. And that's when gambling got introduced to this whole steaming pile of shit. With the entire idea of, you spend microtransactions to get a chance of getting what you want. So instead of, in Angry Birds or in any of these older mobile games, you're just $2, here's your skin, have a nice day. The advent of the gacha game on the mobile industry added this extra layer to where it's like, so now you're not just paying for the item. Now you're paying for an item that then you can spend to have a chance at getting the item that you actually want, which then incites an entire gambling mindset, which also rewards the developer for making things as hard to get as possible. Because you get someone hooked, you got them fucking until they're bled dry, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
You get someone on fucking Fate Go. How many times have you seen, like, on the news or on Reddit or on any degree where someone just like spends their entire life savings, not at a casino, but on fucking Fate Go or Genshin or any of these fucking mobile games. I've had problems with gotcha games in the past too. Like, anyone and everyone is susceptible to this shit. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, gambling addiction is an addiction and it can affect anyone. And the fact that it's pervaded fucking video games is the most heinous shit in the fucking world.
You know what's funny? At one point in time, one of my brothers, he tried to. My brother feels very, very passionate about gotcha games and the whole macro transaction, as we're dubbing them. He feels very passionately against them.
Yes.
At one point in time, he tried to explain this concept of the macro transaction to my father by using a very, at the time, relevant example with EA's Star Wars Battlefront and their predatory loot boxes. And my brother was explaining to my dad, just, oh, let's say little boy, little Timmy over there. He really loves Star Wars. He wants to play as his favorite character, but oh, it's locked behind a loot box. And what this loot box is, oh, you don't just buy it and then you get the character. No, you buy it for the chance to maybe get that character. You're not buying the character, you're buying the chance to maybe get that character. You're buying the chance to gamble for that character. And something that will stick with me to the day I die is the expression on my father's face, the way his face just instantly seeped red with anger and frustration at what the fuck. That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Mm-hmm. It's literally these developers, it's both of them. The developers and the publishers have literally turned video games into casinos. And the craziest part is seemingly nobody cares. Like, if I try to go open a fucking casino, I have to go through like 16 different government boards. I have to get 53 different licenses. I have to get like monthly checkups by the police to make sure I'm not letting children gamble. But if I go fucking make like a Fortnite clone with loot boxes and shit, I can fucking do it. I have no oversight. I can make it in my garage and make millions if it does well. The fact that there's literally zero oversight over these literal digital casinos is insane to
Oh
me.
no.
I don't like government
Has it,
oversight over shit normally, unless it's absolutely required. But the literal double standard here of like a casino has to go through all these hoops and ladders to let adults gamble, but little Timmy can fucking spend all of his money and all of his parents' money in Fortnite, and that's perfectly legal. What?
I don't know, that was something that was of contention and backlash a little while ago. Is there was some backlash towards that whole thing, the whole loot boxes and gotchas at some point in time, was that there were certain games that tried to hide and obscure the rates that the premium items, the SSRs, the whatever you want to call them.
It wasn't I know what you're talking about, and actually it wasn't the fact that they were obscuring it. That was kind of the solution. The problem was that some developers weren't saying what the chance was. And by virtue of them doing that, they basically did what everyone thinks, everyone knows casinos do, and they fix it to where like it automatically scales. Because like so many of these developers have systems in their games that have these things. It came out a while back, like the whole Activision thing where they patented the idea of like, if the game detects that you're a potential spender, they will only match you in games with people who have spent a bunch of money. So that way you can see them with all their cool shit that they paid for to convince you to buy more shit. But it's literally that whole thing with them forcing people to actually reveal the percentages is that they were doing that. They would get a player and they would be able to tell, hey, this player spends a lot of money on our game. We're going to purposely fix the odds so they get their shit less than someone else, because we know if we don't give them what they want, they will keep spending until they get it. That was the problem, and that's where some government oversight came in certain parts of the world. And that's why a lot of gacha games and any game with a loot box mechanic is in a lot of areas required to state this is your chance of getting this item. And has to actually do that, because before, yes, they would very much so fix the odds. But like going back to that Activision thing, developers can still do that, no problem. If you think Fortnite doesn't do that for a second, you're fucking kidding yourself. My blood is boiling right now, Ren. Please just take over for a few seconds. I need to breathe.
Jade. Ninja Fortnite Blevins would never lie to us, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Anywho, let's see what else aside from the fact that macrotransactions, as we dub them, are just actual gambling.
One of the big things that I have a problem with in the modern gaming industry is it's kind of the overarching monetization of everything. And it's how fucked everything has become. Because it's not like the monetization of like, sure, this game, it's a free-to-play game. It's got some microtransactions, whatever. At least the game is free. No, this game was $60 or now $70, which is a whole nother problem. The game's $70. Plus it has these gambling microtransactions in it. Plus it has yearly expansions where if you don't get these yearly expansions, you effectively can't play the game. Or in the case of some of the worst contenders being Call of Duty and all of the sports games, yearly re-releases of the same game. It's all so fucking scummy. It's like, for those of you who don't know, I used to play Destiny. I used to play a lot of Destiny. Do you realize how much money you have to put in to consistently play Destiny? Let's assume you're playing on a console, on the PlayStation 5, because that's where, according to Bungie, over 60% of their player base is. 60% of the players are playing on PlayStation, which means they already had to fork over about $560 for their console. That's including tax. But just think of all of the money that someone who started playing Destiny when it came out has had to pay just to keep relevant in Destiny. Destiny 1 came out, $60. 2 expansions immediately after were $30. So that's $90 for Destiny. Then The Taken King came out at $40. Then Rise of Iron came out at another $40. But this time, now they added microtransactions to Destiny with that. So now if you want all of the skins, if you want all of the dances, the new emotes, all of that stuff, now you have to pay for it. Then they decided, we're going to reboot the entire game. And now you have to pay for Destiny 2, $60. Then they did 2 more baby expansions for another $35 this time. Then they made Forsaken for $50. All the while, still selling microtransactions every single update. Then a year later after Forsaken came out, they started a new thing called the seasonal model, which means every 3 months you have to fork over $10 for a battle pass, and you have to buy that battle pass in order to unlock all of the new content that they added with each update. Otherwise, there's no reason to play Destiny because they don't add content for free players. So that's another $30. All right. Then Beyond Light comes out. No, that was Shadowkeep. Then Shadowkeep comes out. $50. All right. 3 more seasons. That's another $30. Then Beyond Light comes out. That's $60 this time for that expansion. Then another $30 for the season pass. And then we get Witch Queen, which again was $60. But this time, they decide, hey, we're going to release a bunch of dungeons throughout the year, plus the seasons. But this time we're also going to do 4 seasons. All right. So now it's $40 for the seasons, plus an extra $20 for these dungeons that they're releasing throughout the year, because you need to buy the separate dungeon key that is not included in the rest of the expansions. And then they did Lightfall. Again, $60 for this expansion. Another 4 seasons, so that's another $40. Another dungeon key, which is another $20. And now we get to fucking whatever the fuck the new expansion's called for another $60. And now they're like, well, we're changing the way the seasons work. So now there's only going to be 3 seasons from now on. Except they're all $20 a piece now. So now that's an extra $60. So assuming you started playing Destiny when it came out on PS4, assuming you played it on PS4, that's $400 for the PS4. Let me get a calculator out because we'll calculate that. That's $400 for the PS4. That's $60 for Destiny 1. Plus $30 for the season, or $30 plus for the expansions. Plus, mind you, $80 for PlayStation Plus for the year, which is required to play Destiny. You're looking, if you've been playing Destiny since it came out, you have likely spent, assuming you didn't pay any money for microtransactions, for like cosmetic bullshit, because you do have to pay microtransactions in order to buy the seasons. Assuming you didn't spend anything on microtransactions outside of just the seasons, you've approximately spent $1,400 to play Destiny. Just Destiny. Over the last 8.5 years. Which, comparatively, it's not the worst spread over 8 years. But think of all the people who are addicted to this game, who just have to buy everything as it comes out. And that's also without saying how much worse Destiny has gotten over time and how much less content we've gotten with every expansion, yet the prices keep going up because they know they can keep releasing less. It's the same thing with fucking Pokemon and Game Freak. They now know they can keep releasing less and less and charging more for it, and all of the people addicted will not only keep buying the expansions and the seasons and the battle passes and the dungeon keys, Oh, they're also going to be buying those event passes that they do for every holiday. It's like $10 in order to get all of the free bonus cosmetics from the events. All of those emotes, all of those ships, all of those ghost shells, all of those exclusive armor sets. And you wonder why Destiny is making bank. And that's just the example of Destiny. Imagine if you're playing Call of Duty every year, or FIFA, or Madden, or NBA 2K, and you're just buying the exact same game every year for $60 to $70 every year, dropping $1,000 on FIFA Ultimate Team every year, and then starting all over and doing it again every year. That is where our video games industry is right now. All the while, devs can't get money for games from publishers unless they're making a live service game, unless they can show that they're putting in the minimum viable effort to make the maximum amount of money by releasing next to nothing and getting people hooked on the idea that it'll get better eventually. The games industry is the worst it's ever been right now. And while yes, we do get diamonds in the rough, we do get good games. Baldur's Gate 3 just came out, and it's an immaculate game with no microtransactions, no DLC bullshit, no battle passes, no anything. But for every one of those, again, yes, you're very true. Granted, I don't think Larian will be doing that. At most, we're going to get an expansion from what we've heard, and that'll likely have content. I'm not saying expansions are necessarily bad if they justify it. Plenty of my favorite games have expansions that are arguably better than the actual base game. Witcher 3 has 2 expansions that are better than the base game and are worth every penny. But again, for every Witcher 3, for every Baldur's Gate, you have 10 games that are all trying to cop that Destiny money for the minimum viable effort. For every Baldur's Gate 3, you have a Diablo 4. You have an Overwatch 2. You have a Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 2. You have a Fortnite Battle Pass that millions of 5-year-old children are purchasing every day. For every one good example of what video games can become in the modern industry, you have 10 or more that are taking advantage. And that is the ultimate problem that I have with the games industry. But yeah, Ren, how you doing?
Oh, I'm not as heated and fuming as you are.
I just went on a quality Jade rant. My apologies.
Mm-hmm. You're good. You're all good. You're cute.
No, you. But yeah, it's like, just look at all of the big game releases this year. And how many of them are free of microtransactions? How many of them are free of battle passes? How many of them are free of bullshit, of minimum viable product syndrome, of awful optimization because they can just shit it out and not have to worry about it? For every Baldur's Gate 3, you have a Destiny 2 Lightfall. You have a Diablo 4. You have an Assassin's Creed Mirage. You know? And that's crazy because 2023 has been like one of the best years in gaming we've had in a long fucking time. And it's crazy that like while we've had some of the best games we've gotten in a very long time, we've also gotten some of the worst. Redfall, Diablo 4, Gollum, Starfield in terms of PC performance. Wasn't quite this year, but it was the end of last year. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Forspoken. Callisto Protocol. God, that game was awful. But like, all of these games, and there's dozens more that have just come out and just shat the bed this year, compared to like what, the 6 like actually good games, at least from the bigger industry. Like obviously indie games do have massive hits, and there are fantastic, phenomenal indie games. But like in terms of the wider industry, the wider like AAA industry, AA industry, what have we genuinely gotten that's been fantastic this year? Baldur's Gate, Armored Core, Zelda. Maybe Resi 4 Remake. Like, let me pull up. Let's see. Best video games of 2023 from Metacritic. Let me take a look at this real fast. So the highest scoring games from this year: Zelda, Baldur's Gate 3, Resi 4. Mind you, I'm only basically counting games that don't have fuckloads of microtransactions or battle passes or anything. So like Street Fighter 6 is up here. But you guys realize how much fucking DLC that game's gonna have? And how many battle passes it already has? Diablo 4 is up here, but that game is literally the worst monetized game we've gotten all year. So like just looking at like the AAA space, Zelda, Baldur's Gate, and I'm not counting remakes and stuff because like Witcher 3 Special Edition and Metroid Prime Remastered are on here too. But like Legend of Zelda, Baldur's Gate 3, Resi 4, Armored Core 6. Am I missing anything? The Dead Space remake, maybe. We haven't really heard much on Mortal Kombat, but it's Mortal Kombat. But yeah, that is largely my take on the games industry. That was a whole fucking rant. Ren, please, I want you to speak, please. Please, my voice hurts. My blood pressure's up. I need a break, please.
Good. Because I wanted to track back to something that I had a whole thing planned out for like an era, and then you completely glossed over that era, and then I had nothing to talk about for the last hour.
I'm sorry.
And there's like no easy way to segue back into it.
By all means, go ahead.
Aside from the awful monetization models that games have taken, also the what I feel a bit more I feel this a bit more deeply in my bones than Jade feels about her whole. No, that's not even accurate. Hi, I'm Ren, best girl. I don't know how to talk. Anywho, something that I think is very important to the discussion, the topic of the games industry and its decline is the death of creativity. And a very strong, prominent, important era in that regard, at least in my opinion, is the what generation of consoles? The GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox era of game consoles,
Mm-hmm.
where you would see a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, but there was a lot of people just trying shit, throwing it, throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what would stick. There was a lot of games that just were obtuse. They were unconventional to say the least. If you look at any of Treasure's games in that era, you can look at things like Stretch Panic and ask yourself, what the fuck was that? And I think I miss that era of games where there weren't as high of stakes to try something.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't as much pressure for your game to make gangbusters. People could make games that were defined by its control schemes. The sort of the standardization of the twin sticks, the dual joist analog sticks, led bred creativity into certain control schemes. Things like Super Monkey Ball, a game that would not exist in this day and age had it not been made in the GameCube era. I genuinely, wholeheartedly believe that if somebody if somebody were to make a game like that, it would be a $15 PlayStation Network game that nobody talked about. But because it was sort of in that right era, it is just one of those series that have become beloved. Same with Katamari Damacy. Something that just wasn't afraid to experiment with a very unconventional control scheme that I lost track of my train of thought. Anywho, I'm sorry, I'm bad at talking, Jade.
You're fine. You're going crazy. You're doing great.
My point being that there were games that just they weren't afraid to themselves. They weren't bound by as many creative shackles that modern games have now. And I think a big part of that is one, the era it came out in. That GameCube era was sort of the perfect developmental cost era. Two, the lack of a, how do I put this? It was a pre it was an era that existed prior to easy to sell, easy to lease out game engines ready to go for people to develop on. When when devs had to make their games, they would have to make their games from scratch. They would have to make games their engines all from scratch, and with that you would get quirks that were just unique to those games. And oftentimes while developing those ideas, those concepts for that game, while making the engine, the fun sort of took shape and formed those engines themselves.
Yeah.
But in the advent of pre-built engines, Unreal, Unity, things like that,
Oh, fucking
Havoc,
Unity.
that's later. That's not, this ain't about them. But as those engines became more prevalent, the need to think creatively also started to die out, if that makes sense. Where, just letting the game take the shape it wants, you now have an idea of how this engine works and what you can do with it. And so you go to the most obvious answer instead of thinking very quickly about what it is that you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a damn shame. And it also lends to the problem of games started to become more homogenous feeling, even outside of, just following the trends of let's do what's popular.
Yeah.
If 5 games have the same engine, chances are they all have the same engine quirks.
And they feel, a
The
lot of times they'll
same.
feel very samey. Yeah. Like,
Even if you tweak it a little bit, you can still tell, you can still feel it.
this is gonna be an old example, but like you go play like fucking what do you call it? You go play fucking Prototype or Prototype 2, and then go play fucking Saints Row. Saints Row 3 and 4 specifically, and they feel like they're the same game. They're very clearly not, but they feel like they're the same.
And then, God, I must sound like a fucking lunatic being unable to keep a concise, solid point. These are the ramblings of a madwoman.
Don't worry about it. You're fine.
And then, there was that era in the PlayStation Xbox 360 era where everything just sort of looked the same. Everything had to follow that photorealistic sepia filter. Everything has to look brown and desaturated. So not only were games starting to become less unique feeling, they were all starting to feel the same. They're all starting to look the same. And games stopped being about being colorful and unique and having their own identity. It became what spin can we do on this exact same formula that 90% of all the other devs are doing? What can we do to barely stand out amongst the crowd?
Mm-hmm. And that's just been a whole thing with the industry. Gotta love it, right?
Yep. And that sort of became the standard, especially in the PS3 era. Just the whole, once games started to get to the point where they could look half believably photorealistic, there was an obsession with the need to make games look as photorealistic as possible.
Yeah. And that was that entire generation and leading into like the PS4 generation as well. Because that was like a huge part of Overwatch's marketing at the time, where it was like, oh my god, this is the first shooter in years that doesn't look like Call of Duty.
We have wacky, colorful characters. We have our Scrimblow Bimblows. And then Overwatch is bad, but that's aside from the point.
Overwatch was fine until they fucking deleted it and made a new one.
Overwatch had plenty of problems even before then, babe.
I mean, fair, but it wasn't anywhere near as bad as it is now.
Absolutely. I just I lament I lament the direction that became the mainstream for video games. I lament that very few publishers are willing to take the chance to endorse games that are inspired and fun and colorful unless it's proven to be successful. We
Mm-hmm.
don't get new in 2023, we don't get brand new 3D platformers. That 3D platformers basically don't exist anymore. The only things we ever get close to it are remakes of existing series like the Crash Bandicoot remakes, the Spyro Reignited trilogy, remakes of games that existed in the past and sold in the past.
Yeah. And like even the ones we have an idea of that are coming out, like the big rumor is the Jack and Daxter games are going to be getting either a port or a remake here soon for the Jack and Daxter movie. But like, yeah, you just don't see like you kind of will see it every now and again in the indie space, but you definitely 100% never see it in the what do you call it, in the AAA. Never, never, never. Because everything has to be, if you're not copying Call of Duty, Fortnite, or Destiny, chances are you're not going to get the funding for your game. That's basically where the industry is right now. If you're not chasing a trend, you're you may as well not be trying to make a AAA game.
The last company that could even remotely be called a stronghold against that is Nintendo, but even they're not consistent.
Oh, I've gone on rants about that in the past. Nintendo is awful about it.
Sure. Nintendo made a brand new IP, a brand new, fun, colorful IP back in what, 2016 with fucking Splatoon. And that turned out to be a massive success. So much so that Sony's trying to fucking copy it now.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been riding that high ever since. And not just like, oh, we should continue to make brand new things that people will love. No, let's just ride Splatoon. Oh, we tried to do something new again with arms. Remember arms?
But that didn't do very well. So just make Splatoon 3 and make it the exact same as Splatoon 2. Do it now.
We took a risk once and it paid off. We took a risk again, it didn't. Let's not take a risk again.
And that's where that specific line comes up. It's the idea of risk. Risk isn't allowed to exist anymore in the modern industry. You don't want to risk anything. You want to just do what the publisher knows is successful. Why risk anything when if you just copy Fortnite, you know you're going to make money. If you copy Roblox, you're going to make money. If you add a dating app to your game, just like Roblox, you're going to make money. Did you hear about that, by the way, Ren?
What?
They're adding a dating app to
What?
Roblox.
Why? Why?
An
Why?
actual fucking dating app to Roblox.
But Roblox is for children.
Uh-huh.
I get it. People like Roblox and they enjoy their game, but that's mm,
See, if you just want to play a game where you can meet like potential significant others, just play Final Fantasy 14. Just do that. What child is going to be playing Final Fantasy 14? They don't have money to pay for a subscription service. Just play 14. Just do it.
Oh, I was gonna say something, but I feel like you would hate it.
Say it.
If you want to meet a life partner who you can love and hate for the rest of your life in good faith, fucking play TF2.
Gross. Yeah, no thanks.
Oh God, we didn't even cover advent of the digital market and the history of that, have we? With
No.
things like with with smaller digital titles. Fuck, is that a discussion for another time?
That's a
How are
whole nother podcast. That's a whole nother fucking can of worms.
we saving that for a why Jade and Ren, why the best girls hate why they hate digital games?
Oh, God, that's a whole fucking nother thing, babe. But
Shit, we didn't even talk about like the death of the handheld gaming systems.
see, I think the whole idea of like the death of handheld gaming systems matters a bit less now. Now that we're in the era of the Steam Deck and all of the Steam Deck like copiers, I feel like we're and the Switch, of course. Like I feel like with the Switch and the deck, we're kind of hitting a new golden age of handhelds in a way. Like the Switch has its problems, 100%. But the fact that you can play what you can play on the Switch and especially on the Steam Deck, the fact that I can play fucking Elden Ring at like good settings on the Steam Deck and it runs great is fucking coming from my GBA ass like growing up with a GBA and then a PSP and then a Vita, like the fact that I could just play Elden Ring or Starfield or The Witcher 3 on a fucking handheld is insane. And I really want to get my hands on a Steam Deck again, but
See, I think there are absolutely merits to having a handheld device that's nearly PC that you can just play most modern games on. I think there's absolutely merit to that. It does not even come close to filling that void, that niche. I miss the era of games that were designed specifically for weaker hardware on lower budgets that were lower stakes and cost less. I miss the 3DS. I miss the PS Vita. I miss the PS3 or PS3. I miss the
PSP.
PSP. I miss the I miss smaller titles. I miss smaller budgets.
Yeah.
I miss games that were catered to these devices specifically and not just, oh, we're going to make something that's meant to be, the big console, big home console title, but also has to run on a handheld hardware. No, there's absolutely merit and positive sides to that, but those those smaller games don't exist outside of indie titles and certain mobile games. However, mobile game industry has, microtransaction and macrotransaction syndrome out the wazoo.
Mm-hmm.
I miss just being able to I miss being able to just buy a $15 shitty whatever game on my 3DS, play it, and enjoy myself.
Yeah. One of my favorite games of all time is a fucking shitty fucking Vita game that nobody knows of, and it's fucking Soul Sacrifice Delta. Like, 100%. The idea of having this very clearly designed to be handheld device that would get games made specifically for it is a novel thing, and it's something great. That's the Game Boy, the Game Boy Advance, the Game Gear, the PS Vita, PSP, 3DS. Like, these are great pieces of hardware. I still have all of my, aside from my Game Gear, which exploded one night and we had to like put out a fire with a fire hydrant. Anyway,
You fucking what, mate?
my Game Gear exploded, but don't worry about that. I think one of the batteries in it literally exploded and it caught fire. But
Reminds me, I should probably check battery on my PSP, make sure it hasn't expanded.
yeah, but like I love, like you said, I love those little hands. I still play my Vita and my 3DS every now and again. Typically like once a month at least. Like I just started playing Super Mystery Dungeon on the 3DS like last week because I was just feeling a little nostalgic and I hadn't played that one. And I play Soul Sacrifice Delta literally like once a month. Um but yeah, like having something like that again would be pretty nice, but no one's gonna fucking do it at this point. We're kind of just
It,
past that. The Switch exists. We're probably getting a Switch 2 here. And PlayStation has come out and said they're never making a PlayStation Portable again. And Xbox has never made one and likely never will because they kind of don't even care about the Xbox anymore. They're more on PC gaming now anyway. So it's just,
and that's why I specifically said the death of the handheld.
yep.
It's it's a bygone era that frankly probably never will exist again unless the Switch 2 does come out and Nintendo tries to force that again, but it's going to be at a cost that is not it's going to come at a cost that's not worth the cost.
Yeah. I mean, we do still get indie ones all the time. Like that Crank one that came out that's getting like all its own games. That one's kind of cute. Um Obviously like the Analog Pocket and stuff like that just is an emulation console, but like more like the little Crank one, like we do get you know, original stuff rarely, but it happens. Like even going back to like the days of the Ouya and stuff, it's just rare, and we just won't know until it happens if we'll ever get another one of those again. And on that somber note, is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Anything else you'd you know, like to speak on?
Mm, I don't think so. I got all of my general ideas out, albeit a bit broken up and, you know, through the lens of a mad woman who can't hold a coherent thought for more than 5 minutes.
All right. So then I guess that is going to be the end of our little podcast for tonight. Let me I hope everyone had fun. I hope you had fun recording this with me, Ren.
I'd like to talk more than, I'd like to maybe go. Fuck, I can't even think. I fuck it.
Fuck it, do it live. But thank you guys for everyone who watches. Remember, you guys can get episodes 2 weeks early on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Check it out, patreon.com/JadeNovanis. We'll get you that. We will have a new episode in about 2 weeks. As to what it is, I guess you guys will have to just find out when it's posted. But until next time, take care, guys.
Bye.